Welcome to our panel discussion on Constitution Day as a jumping off point for civic engagement programming and events. I'm joined today by two panelists who have run innovative Constitution Day programming, including Quiz Bowl Constitution Day event and various types of Constitution Day programming, including writing or practicing rewriting parts of the Constitution. On the panel today, we have Daniela Mascarenhas, Assistant Professor of Political Science at Xavier University of Louisiana, and Tom Pope, Professor of Political Science at Lee University. I'm William Obrochta, Assistant Professor of Political Science at Texas Lutheran University and Director of Professional Development for the APSA Civic Engagement Section. The goal of today's panel is to think about Constitution Day programs on our panelists' campuses and how those programs are impetus or inspiration for other types of programming that can then help our panelists kind of keep the momentum throughout the rest of the academic year. And so I wanted to start off asking Daniela about that momentum question. How you think about Constitution Day as the way to inspire or link to, or maybe it's completely separate from other types of civic engagement efforts that are on campus, other things that the political science department or academic affairs might engage in. How does Constitution Day fit within that broader framework of what those civic engagement efforts might be?
I think the timing of Constitution Day lends itself really well to especially inspire civic engagement around elections. So Constitution Day is smack dab in the middle of September, and a lot of us are coming back to campus just merely weeks before it happens. So there is a lot of startup effort that goes on as soon as you are back on campus for the fall semester. But then if you do something that really attracts an audience, you can also then segue into talking about election season. So I have used Constitution Day to then inspire voter registration efforts, especially because a good portion of our students actually come from all over the United States. And so I can impress upon them the importance of registering here in Louisiana, right? And how to do that, and giving them information on how to get registered here locally. And then that can inspire not just voter registration drives or voter registration informationals. There can also be conversations of what's on the ballot, um, and sort of educate the campus community about what they have on the ballot. For instance, right now in Louisiana, in New Orleans, we have city council elections, we have our mayoral elections, we have amendments to the city charter that are on our ballot. It's early. I went and early voted yesterday. So it's a great segue into a what's on the ballot conversation. And then it's also a great segue a few weeks later into election day, right? And the get out the vote efforts for election day. And then after that, you can also do an election debrief, right? You can do an election watch party where my students have gotten together and sort of watched the election results roll in, talk about them as they're rolling in. And then you can do a debrief right afterwards. So I think Constitution Day, especially based on its timing, can give you a whole semester's worth of programming if you're able to capture a good audience that's interested in civic engagement.
Tom, what are your thoughts on relating Constitution Day to other civic engagement efforts?
Yeah, I mean, I do think, as we all kind of experience, it comes so early in the semester that it just kind of hits you like a truck. And so the challenge of it being so early is the students are just now getting situated. It's hard to rally the troops initially. But if you can pull it off, I think as Daniela mentioned, it's a great framing opportunity. We have more recently tried to think about the sequencing of our events, and Constitution Day and our Quiz Bowl is a way of us reaching out to our undergraduate population, but also to the broader community. And by bringing them to campus and engaging in this kind of like, um, you're learning the facts of the Constitution, but again, it's not like a rich deliberation of the theory of the Constitution or anything like that, but just knowing the nuts and bolts of it in a fun and entertaining environment is a good way of like sparking something. And we follow that up then with something a little bit more deliberative. So we have a student reading group that will be reading texts of political science or political philosophy that a lot of the volunteers from Constitution Day might say, oh, this is kind of fun. I kind of like thinking about this. They can get plugged into the reading group. Then in October, the Center for Responsible Citizenship hosts an annual symposium that, again, is kind of open to the community. It's discussions based on readings on a theme. And so, again, we hope to use that big tent of Constitution Day, bringing in the community to then channel the energy into more robust experiences where you can really deliberate and have a conversation about the nature and goals of governments over the course of the year.
So we've definitely gotten in the initial, both of y'all's initial responses through December, right? That's where Daniela on the timeline got it. And Tom was arguing, okay, that's going to continue the momentum throughout the rest of the year. If we get to December and we're excited about that, then we can come back and continue those things moving forward. Are there specific barriers to momentum that y'all have experienced? And I can think about this in, I guess, two ways. One is the yearly momentum of, we just got both of the responses. The timing is great. The timing is terrible. Yes. But are there barriers to maintaining that momentum, I guess, to the next semester? And then are there barriers to the momentum carrying through to the next year? I know, Tom, in the previous panel, you talked about recruiting some of the same people again, and we kind of build the momentum. But after a while, you have one bad year or something like that, and that can potentially ditch the momentum. So, Daniela, I wondered if you had thoughts about momentum between semesters, over years, and how Constitution Day plays into keeping that momentum going.
I definitely think that the barrier to momentum is definitely that break right before we come back in the spring. But I try, especially for instance, in 2024, to get students then interested in having conversations around the primary elections that will happen. Louisiana just started our primary elections. We were a jungle primary previously, but I try and get students thinking about what's happening sort of broadly. Another thing that we try and do, even in the spring, our programming sort of shifts in focus. In the spring, we do a lot more of, I think, what Tom was talking about, this like deliberative conversation where I'll get students together, especially at my club meetings, the GAPUS meetings, and we will review newsworthy events and think about how that reflects on our campus. What can we do on campus to get people talking about it? There's far more like deliberative planning that's happening in spring. I do think the momentum is difficult to maintain, especially in my case, since I'm doing a lot of these like highly interactive things. But one of the invaluable lessons I learned was through a fellowship that I did with this organization called the Center for Artistic Activism. And they put me on to the technique of creative civic engagement or artistic activism. How can you do something that is surprising? And that sort of inspired my Constitution Day programming, of course. But other things that I have done with students, especially leading up to, for instance, the 2024 election, is thinking of how they can do surprising activities. They continued this even in spring of 2024. I had students, it was their idea. They threw what they called a political party. So they used party games to inspire people to go out and vote. So they had a trivia raffle where the trivia was all about who was running for election on a state, a local, and a federal level. They also had a Guess Who game where they had faces of candidates, and you sort of had to guess who it was based on the descriptor. Someone would give you a fact. And then they also, instead of pin the tail on the donkey, they had pin the polling location. So they had a map of New Orleans, and they would ask these participants to go out and where is the polling location? Can you find it? And if you were right, you got a prize for all of these games. If you were right, you got a prize because you were a smart cookie. So you got a bag of cookies. And if you didn't win, you still got a prize, but it was a Dum Dum lollipop. And I'm sure you can guess why it was a Dum Dum lollipop. So these are the types of activities that I think will maintain that momentum and keep people interested when you do something creative or surprising. You don't have to just have this sort of quiet, deliberative experience in civic engagement, which I think is important. I still have these reflective instances. But I also think that momentum is maintained by the surprise element, by the fun element. If you're not having fun, your students aren't having fun, and your campus community isn't having fun. So I try and think about the ways that I can inspire not anger or feelings of injustice or disappointment, but how can I inspire excitement? How can I inspire fun? How can I inspire creativity?
Tom, your thoughts about momentum?
Yeah, I mean it's hard. You hit the ground running, you have this big event, and you don't want it to just be a flash in the pan that dies out. I think that the challenge to momentum is just students have these ebbs and flows of enthusiasm over the course of the semester as they become increasingly stressed or find moments of leisure. And so I try to think hard about events throughout the course of the semester. We've just done this thing in September, so like when are they going to have a chance to catch their breath, but at the same time to have enough memory of what's going on before they can do the next thing. And so I try to be respectful of their commitment to students while providing them with like enough to keep them engaged. That's I'm always tweaking the balance on that, so I don't know that I've got it figured out, but that's in my mind. Um, I also maintaining enthusiasm among Lee undergraduates. I try to align my curriculum with what's going on as well. I make sure that I teach constitutional law every fall semester. And so as we are talking about the American Constitution through the Quiz Bowl, at the same time, I've got this cohort of students that is really thinking deeply about the implications of the various provisions of the Constitution. And oftentimes those students are the ones that can help me to really run my rooms and be readers and adjudicators in the Quiz Bowl. And they can be enthusiastic about it. So I found that that is helpful. Just think about like, what are you teaching while you do this thing? Is there a chance to have those things dovetail? Um, Additionally, I'm also thinking about momentum not only with my undergraduates, but with the community and with the high school students. And particularly, I had mentioned this during our last talk, but I'm trying to build momentum with the high school teachers. And so as I'm hosting these various events, I try to re-invite the community to them, and just remind them that the things that we're doing are not just for the undergraduate population, but are trying to develop Cleveland, Tennessee as a whole. Um, and we invite the high school students to, again, our symposium. I have a summer reading group where we will read a work of fiction and talk about political themes in it. And that's just a really, again, lighthearted event that can be the culmination of a thing. Or if it's your first event, now you start looking forward to Constitution Bowl in the fall. So I do think if you're going to do something that requires long commitment over and over and over again. Timing the rhythms of the semester so that people uh, think of you and what you're trying to do over the course of the year is going to be a lot better than just like popping out of nowhere in September and hoping that they jump on board.
Exactly, exactly, right. Um, But now the challenge is now we've sold you, the potentially junior faculty member, into a year of civic engagement programming, right? And so I guess I want to hit this question head on, which is, Constitution Day is a federal mandate. In some cases, that's passed down to political science departments, and then in some cases, hey, you're it, do something, right? And I want to hear a little bit more in both of y'all's instances about first how you came to be in charge or directing or running the Constitution Day programming. And then second, how, toward Tom's point a second ago, how you get credit for it. So we just discussed kind of aligning the curriculum as a way to streamline things so that things line up in a certain way, or, in Daniela's case, right, there's speakers that are coming in, and maybe there's a way to say, hey, these speakers that are coming in, that's an important part of my service expectations or my teaching expectations, these types of things. But not to say that we're not all altruists and willing to do this for the good of the cause, but there's limited time and resources, and so making sure that the work is recognized is particularly important. So, Daniela, I wondered if you could just briefly how you got to be in charge of the program, and then what your thoughts are on getting credit in this way.
Yeah. I I saw a vacuum basically. That Constitution Day hadn't been done. Apparently, it had been done before me. But since I had been there, the 2 years that I had been at Xavier, I hadn't seen an event that really attracted a campus audience, and a local audience as well. So I saw a vacuum and I was interested in it because parts of my research touch on civic engagement, and an active, political society. And I'm also in charge of teaching the American government courses. I teach at least two sections of it every semester. We're a teaching heavy university here. And so I felt that I was equipping my students with a discussion of the Constitution that felt very foreign to them, but I wanted to give them the opportunity in this department, and obviously the benefit to the rest of the campus community, to engage with the Constitution beyond just here's the textbook, here's parts of it that we read in the classroom, and let's move on. Here's your grade about it. So I would say it's a labor of love that came from both the research and the teaching that I do. Um, in terms of getting credit for it, I would say it is a massive part of how I frame my own faculty portfolio. Um, at Xavier, we want to think about who we are, in in all aspects, and how all of our teaching, our research, and service interact with each other. And so I get credit for it because I am the one advertising it and I'm the one telling other faculty about it. And it has attracted attention. We've gotten news articles written about it, and I think that that is the sort of credit that I'm looking for, right? That other people are recognizing this effort, not just at Xavier, but also the effort of the political science department led by me. I'm sort of the face of these civic engagement activities. And maybe some would argue that's not enough credit, but I guess it is for me. I have a fairly, um, I would say, continuous thread that goes through my research, my teaching, and my service. And it doesn't feel disjointed. It feels like who I am as a teacher scholar, to think about civic engagement.
Tom, what about your role, initial role, coming to be in charge of it and thinking about where it fits within the rest of your portfolio and work?
Yeah, I mean, as you alluded, somebody's got to do it. And so if somebody's got to do it, it may as well be me. And that I think I would rather be responsible for an event that the campus has to get behind than to let somebody else take care of it, right? Because that's just an opportunity for me to do something interesting, for me to have my vision affect the entire campus. But if I just let somebody else take care of it, then I mean, frankly, I think I do things pretty well, and I don't want someone to do something worse. And I think that uh, it's just healthy for political scientists to be involved in the study of politics on a campus. Um, so in my mind, like it was just something that I was going to do regardless of what it was. How do I get credit for it? I think Danielle's point is right. Like you kind of have to toot your own horn because nobody wants to just naturally give accolades to people if they don't know that things exist. And so it's important that uh, you make it known that something is happening, that it is mandatory for the campus to do. The federal government has required this, and you are helping the university maintain its federal funding. I am personally responsible for every single federally subsidized loan here on campus, right? Um, so I mean, you can pitch that, but that also it adds some clout that the institution has to support you in some sense. If you're doing something that's public facing, like I think what both of us are doing, then the university's reputation is on the line. So certainly they're going to care about what you're doing. If you do a poor job, then they're going to look bad. If you do a good job, then you are bringing in new students and guests from the community to observe your campus. Something that we've started doing that, it's kind of time consuming, but if you're able to write press releases either before or afterwards and send them out to the local newspaper, that's helpful, right? Local newspapers just love talking about, civic engagement and to talk about the community coming together and sharing in something that it's gold. And that certainly helps with social capital on campus. I think that easily builds in, particularly at a teaching institution, to capital towards tenure and promotion, where you can talk about your service load as benefiting the recruiting of the institution, of connecting the institution with major public figures on campus. Um, I think that you could potentially build in if the program is robust enough, you might be able to get a teaching load reduction if it is significant enough in terms of time investment. That's not going to start early, but if the campus views it as valuable, it's worth at least thinking how much time is this taking of my load, and is it bringing enough value to the institution? And then also, I think if you're able to find as I mentioned in the other session, external funding for this. You can be materially subsidized for your time. And that I think is important to make sure that given, your finite time and finite attention, that you are being valued. So it requires some entrepreneurship and creativity, but I have not found it to be terribly difficult to find that my time is compensated through recognition or advancements.
Those are both interesting perspectives because, as I was kind of mentioning to y'all before the session started, at many institutions, there's a not me type of approach. And that means that student affairs or the library, those seem to be the most common two organizations on campus that are responsible for Constitution Day programming. But political science departments or programs sometimes intentionally have stepped away from that. And to hear two stories of, there is value in leaning into it, and there are many advantages from doing that, I think, should help audience members think about, well, you know, is that actually a vacuum that those institutions are doing it because no one else has stepped up and wants to do it? Or are they a partner, right? Is there something that they're doing that they would be willing or interested in some additional support, or as both of you mentioned, expertise involved in leading something that they might not themselves be as familiar with? Um, Obviously we talked about some disadvantages from that being in terms of time, right? But I think like many civic engagement um, projects, at most institutions, there's a way, as both of you were mentioning, to divide that between research, teaching, service to try to integrate it as much as you can, even if the institution itself doesn't exactly recognize civic engagement as a quote unquote thing worth doing. There are other ways to integrate it in. The one other interesting aspect of Constitution Day seems to be that because it's federally mandated, a lot of people are saying they did something. And so finding a way to demonstrate and describe that the thing you did is part of a bigger program or a project or more than just, hey, I did something. I'm the Constitution Day person every year. that's enough to say I sent the email or I gave out the pocket constitutions, but really finding a way to differentiate that, I think can be important for a junior faculty member so that people see some context around it, as opposed to just, yep, I did Constitution Day again this year. I'm the reliable person doing something. That something is kind of meaningful. Um, I guess the last question I wanted to reflect on a little bit, and that we've discussed throughout, but mostly we've talked about Constitution Day as a jumping off point for election programming or other things. I wondered if y'all thought about the events and the way you structure Election Day, kind of that's the next traditional focus, as Daniela was mentioning, as different from the kinds of things that we include in Constitution Day programming. And if so, how and why? Because it's very easy to say, well, we do this for Election Day, let's duplicate it for something else. Or we do this for Constitution Day, let's duplicate it. So, Daniela, you seemed like you had a lot of agreement to that thought. So, what are your thoughts on the differences for that programming?
For Constitution Day, I do like it to be it can be creative, but it can certainly has to have a deliberative element to it, is the way that I view it. Constitution Day, I want my students to be reflecting on the values that they have of what makes a good and just society. And I want them to have these conversations, and I want to have space for those conversations. I want to host a space where they can engage in these deeper conversations, have disagreements with each other, work through them or not. I think that's really important for Constitution Day programming, and I think very differently about my election programming. My election programming is far more action oriented. I am not necessarily trying to host space for people to talk about the election, even though I do have election watch parties. I do have like what's on the ballot conversations. There's more of like an imperative to action. I get out the vote, like literally go vote, like get away from me and get out of this room and go vote, type of perspective, for my election programming. So I do see them as very different. I see them as complementary, of course. Both of them are related to active and I think beneficial civic engagement. But for Constitution Day, I always want to be a little bit more reflective. I want the tone to be creative, fun, but still have some depth and seriousness to it. Whereas I don't necessarily want to inspire a ton of reflection. I think, especially because I'm trying to be nonpartisan, right? In my election programming, I really want that more to be get people registered, action oriented, get people going to vote, action oriented, especially for young people who have very low registration rates, very low voter turnout rates, and especially in a state like Louisiana that also has very low voter turnout rates.
Tom, any final thoughts on differences in programming?
Yeah, I mean, I intentionally keep Constitution Day separate from discussions of go and vote elections. I think the conversation surrounding elections in the minds of students and community members tends towards partisanship. And I want for Constitution Day to be an opportunity for the community to come together and think about citizenship and what does it mean to live this shared life where we're kind of pursuing goals together, and how have we created institutions to facilitate that. Um, so I don't have any reference to go and register, get out the vote, anything like that. Although on campus, following the event, there will be, voter registration tables and things like that. Um, I'm just zealous in making sure that this event feels like a more welcome opportunity than what I think a lot of people are expecting out of politics or political engagement. And then once they see that political life can be more than just factions screaming at one another, then we can say, all right, we'll like go out there and make that happen. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think to wrap the panel up a little bit, right? Thinking strategically seems to be the theme of the panel, right? Like, how is Constitution Day fitting in with other programming? Not just assuming that the same event that might work for one thing can be replicated for another, and then not just seeing Constitution Day as a silo thing that once I've done this one federally mandated civic engagement or political participation related activity, now I'm done and can say, well, then we've accomplished everything this year. Let's hand it off to a student club or someone else to engage in the rest of the programming. And so, both of y'all were talking a lot about that integration of Constitution Day within whatever else you were doing, but also being thoughtful and intentional about it. And that's what I think the message for the audience members would be, is how can we be thoughtful and intentional about when you get hit by Constitution Day like a truck when it shows up at the beginning of the year, preparing in advance and making those types of decisions. So I want to thank both of y'all for participating in the panel and remind all the audience members that if you haven't seen the first iteration of the panel, where our panelists talk more about their specific programs on their campuses, that I'd encourage you to go take a look at it. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.